Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome to our wonderful event for the vote for BIPOC in Georgia. If you're not really familiar with what that stands for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It's a new term that a lot of people favor more. And today we have three guest speakers, Benjamin Cole, Jerry Gonzalez, and Rosa Maria Kleiberg. And I would just like to let you know that there is, if anyone is a Georgia voter, which I do not know, or you know Georgia voters, I'm going to put this link in the chat. It's all the information that Georgia voters abroad will need for voting. And I also would like to, before we start, I would like to invite everyone, if you've read Isabel Wilkerson's book Cast, we'll be having a Books Abroad book club on this Sunday, and I'm also going to put that in the chat. Please feel free to join us. And with that, Annalika, it's all on you.
Sure, thank you, Angela. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm here joined by Angela from the Global Black Caucus and also by Monsi, Norma, and Miguel from the Hispanic Caucus. Well, first of all, I'd like to go a bit through the background of why we thought this could be an event that I would like to talk about. So, we've seen that in past elections, we've seen suppression of voters. There's a few documentaries and movies and films done about this and how it goes in different states. And we know that Georgia, specifically in 2018, the elections were exposed to a lot of inaction by the state to prevent people from voting. And we saw many leaders emerge from this, namely Stacey Abrams, but other organizations came up to try to protect better the voting rights of people of color, of Black people, of Indigenous people, but also to mobilize and get people registered to vote. And today we're joined by activists and organizers that have participated one way or the other on, mobilizing the vote and also protecting the rights of people of color in Georgia. I would like to talk a bit more about, what has happened recently, how the last election went, and what is happening right now and how we as Americans abroad can help a bit. So with us today, we have three great speakers. We have Benjamin Cole, who's a Black Lives Matter activist from Georgia. We have Jerry Gonzalez, who's the CEO of the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials, GALEO. And we have Rosa Maria Kleiberg, who's an activist and organizer in Georgia. And without further ado, I'd like to move on to have our speakers briefly introduce themselves. So if you're able in 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourself, and then we can go into the questions. So Rosa, could we start with you?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Good night, good afternoon. I know you are everywhere around the globe. My name is, like she said, Rosa Kleiberg. I am a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for 11 years. And my specialty is critical care nursing. And because of the situation, the political situation that was happening and the health crisis, I decided to stand up and do something. And I joined the general election in September. And we formed a group of 50 volunteers around all the states that we work with the Spanish community. And I help recruit people, marketing, recruiting opportunities, training, and help volunteers and give them all the support they need. That's my experience that I had. And now, because of those amazing people that I saw at the general election in Florida, that's what I helped. I was very inspired by it, by seeing so many leaders and so many amazing people that they let me, have a voice as a volunteer, that it really pushed me to do something else. So I formed a group it's called the Latins Vote, which is also a group that is formed to outreach Spanish-speaking communities, but also for making more available the opportunities for people to volunteer. So I merged them together in this group and other groups to work in Georgia. So that's what I'm doing right now. Nice to meet you all. I will probably gonna explain more later.
Indeed, we do have some questions for you, and I'm sure our audience will have more questions as well. Jerry, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. My name is Jerry Gonzalez. I am CEO of Caleo, also known as the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials. We're a nonpartisan organization focused on promoting civic engagement and leadership development of the Latino community in the state of Georgia. We've been in existence since 2003 as an organization doing great work in Georgia. We've seen the Latino electorate grow from when we started in 2003 from 10,000 Latino registered voters in Georgia to now well over 250,000 voters. So it's made a tremendous amount of progress. I think we're going to talk about some of the statistics that we've seen in the last couple of elections. But in general, we are having an outpouring of support from all over the country and all over the world, focused on Georgia, because the control of the U.S. Senate certainly relies on the outcome of the election in Georgia. And certainly we've staffed up our team to make sure we were expecting a runoff, but we weren't expecting certainly the hang of the balance of the U.S. Senate to be focused on the runoff elections here in Georgia. So certainly we've risen to the occasion, and we've implemented processes where people can volunteer to help with our efforts here in Georgia. So certainly would love to talk more about that as we go along, but I just wanted to give a brief introduction. I'm of Mexican descent, born in Laredo, Texas, living in Atlanta, Georgia for the now 20 plus years in Atlanta, Georgia. And I love to travel all over the world as well. So maybe run into you all in some of the places that you're living. So thank you.
That'll be great, Jerry. Do let us know when you come around, because you now have
that sounds good.
a lot of contacts all over the world. And Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Ben Cole. As Onelika said, I'm from Georgia, or I'm a Georgia voter. As of now, I am from the South, and originally from Mississippi. I was born there, grew up between Mississippi and Alabama. And after I did my bachelor's and master's in the U.S., I came here to Germany and switched my voter registration to Georgia, because that's where my mom lives now, and that's where I call home now. A little bit about myself: I did a bachelor's and master's in political science, and I'm here in Germany doing a dissertation also in political science, focusing on radicalization. I have always been a bit politically active. I volunteered a bit for the Obama campaign in 2012, which was exciting in conservative Alabama to volunteer for the Obama campaign. And then I started volunteering with Democrats Abroad just this year during the global primary, when they sent out, email for asking for help. And then over the summer, I got more involved seeing, the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and I decided to get more involved with the organization, to spend more time trying to get out the vote, because I realized, the only way that we get structural change is if we get change in who is making these decisions, who's in these offices. And I've done some extra anti-racism activism. I was able to lead a march and protest over the summer for celebrating Juneteenth, and to mourn Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And yeah, so my life right now is mostly consumed with trying to figure out what's the next action to do.
Good, thank you, Ben, and it's great to have you on board and so active in Democrats Abroad. Okay, so let's move on to some questions, and to all our participants, feel free to write your questions in the chat, and then we can give you the floor to ask the question as we go through. Monsi, would you like to ask the first question to Jerry?
Of course. Hold on just a second. I need to get to the question section. So sorry. Give me 1 minute. So Jerry, GALEO's Latino Vote has published reports on both the 2016 election and 2018 midterm elections. Can you provide us with a short summary of these and predict how this most recent election will compare to those, please?
Sure. We've done a study of the Latino electorate in Georgia for several presidential cycles before as well, just to sort of recognize and acknowledge sort of the growth of the Latino electorate and the power of the Latino electorate here in Georgia. In 2016, we did that analysis, which was our most recent analysis that we did. We partnered with Naleo Educational Fund for part of that program, and also the Department of Political Science at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. And what we did was essentially did an assessment of the Latino electorate. In Georgia, there's a self-identification process that's binary. It's either you're one thing, not the other. But as Latinos, we know that Latinos can be many things when it comes to race and ethnicity. So if you select one or leave it blank, you may be not classified as a Latino. So the Georgia Secretary of State's office misses about 40% of the Latino electorate, which is why it's important for us to do the analysis that we do. And we use that analysis as well for our voter outreach efforts. People that we do a surname match, which Naleo does in other states as well, because there isn't a race ethnicity in all states. Georgia is one of those states because of Section 205 of the Voting Rights Act that was requiring that type of information to be collected. But that being said, we do the analysis, and what we found was the Latino electorate had grown to about 240-some thousand back in 2016. And what we also found was that the Latino voter participation rates for the second presidential cycle in a row were outperforming the Latino voter participation rates nationally. So Georgia's Latino voters were engaged in the electoral process, were participating at higher rates, not just for this 2020 election cycle that we saw. People were surprised about the Latino participation rate, but if you've been paying attention to Georgia, you would have seen that the Latinos were actually punching above their weight line in weight classes, if you will, with regards to participating compared to the national Latino voter participation rate. And that was also confirmed with an analysis that was done by the City University in New York. They did an analysis in 2018 of the midterm election cycle, where they looked at several states, and they looked at Georgia, and they said that Latino voters in Georgia outperformed all other racial ethnic groups, including whites. So Latinos in Georgia are involved, are engaged, and are showing up to vote in higher numbers. And we certainly saw a lot of that in the leading up to the general election in Georgia, particularly with mail-in voting and absentee and voting early in person. But also, I think on election day, we're going to see significant numbers of the Latino electorate. So we're going to be doing that analysis again in 2020, and certainly we'll keep everybody apprised of those results. But Latinos in Georgia are engaged and involved in the political process, and we're working to make sure that we can turn them out to vote in the runoff elections that are happening not just January 5th, but also we have runoff elections happening tomorrow for local races that still need to be decided.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure that, I mean, the fact that we're seeing a proliferation in the Latino vote in Georgia has much to do with the community organizing and the work that activists have been doing. So thank you to people like you. These trends, I think, are definitely something that we can see if we continue doing this work.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is something that we've been doing that has attributed to the environment that we're in. Georgia is a hostile state to immigrants. It's a voter suppression state too. So those that want to participate in the electoral process have to go through a gauntlet of obstacles that are there for them to be able to exercise their franchise of voting. So it is a bit of a challenge, and certainly one area that I like to point out is the city of Gainesville. We've been doing more than a decade's worth of work in that area. And what we saw when we first started doing work there was voter participation rate in the city of Gainesville, for example, was about 30% in the Latino community voter participation. In the last 2016 presidential cycle, voter participation rate in Gainesville was at 48%, which was 1 percentage higher than the national Latino voter participation rate that year. But that's significant, going from 30% voter participation to 48% as well. So just in that area, we've been the ones that have been doing the work, and most of the invitation for voters to engage in the political process has been made by us and not necessarily parties or campaigns. Campaigns and parties have tended to ignore the Latino electorate in Georgia, unfortunately, but that's changing, I think, with this election cycle.
And we've noticed that your academic background is in engineering. How and why did you come to transition to nonprofit work? And how do you feel that there's a greater need in politics for people from diverse professional backgrounds?
Thanks. Yeah, my mother asked me that all the time. It's like, why do you study so hard to be an engineer and now you're doing this work? I said, well, I told my mom, I said, well, I like working with people more than I like working with machines. And there's more variables to deal with when it comes to social justice work. So I think I'm still working, but applying my skills that I learned in engineering to the work that we're doing now. I mean, it is something that I think people from all walks of life can contribute to our society in different ways. People are equipped with different types of skills, and that's part of the things that we teach in our leadership program, is that we have to create the space for everybody to be able to contribute in a positive way, one way or another, to where us as leaders have that responsibility to expand the opportunity for people to be able to contribute, no matter their education, no matter their language, no matter their citizenship. People should be able to contribute to make society better. And that's part of what we try to emulate here at Galileo.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, for your perspective, and also for giving us, a taste that everyone from different backgrounds can help and can get engaged. Angela, would you like to ask Ben?
Yes, I have a great question for Ben. Good evening, Ben. Can you talk to us about the impact that gerrymandering has had in Georgia over the past several years, particularly in regards to the district that you're from?
Yes, I would like to talk about gerrymandering in Georgia because I am learning so much about how the counties are set up in Georgia. Georgia is like an odd state when it comes to voting districts that I think has had some systems that other voter suppression states have not had. One of the things that I learned is that Georgia has the second most amount of counties of all the states in the United States. It has 159 counties, right? And it's second only to Texas. And obviously it's not the second biggest state. And so the reason why that is actually is because when Georgia was founded as a state, white landowners wanted to ensure their power over what they knew would become urbanized cities, right? And so the urban myth, as it is that they created enough courthouses in the state of Georgia that a white landowner or the owner of a plantation would only be a day's mule ride away from the nearest courthouse. And the courthouse is the center of a county. And so that's the reason why, or according to the myth, the reason why we have so many counties. The reality is that whether or not they actually said it needs to be a day's mule ride away, who knows? But they did create this many counties so that the landowning white population would be close enough to a courthouse that they would have effectively a single vote in the state legislature. And that was the rule in Georgia for decades. That rule was only tossed out by the Supreme Court in the 1980s, I believe. As far as the kind of federal districting, tends to follow the same path. White landowners and the white majority in Georgia have always just kind of used the ability to redraw the district lines to kind of choose who they wanted to vote for them, rather than choosing or ensuring that all of the people who lived in these areas would get an equal say in the voting politics, right? And so what that ends up doing is creating a system where white landowners have an inflated vote over, you know, urban and more areas where there are more people of color represented. And this, again, like, is still, we're seeing this still today to some degree. Of course, it's not as explicit as it used to be, but we're seeing this through the implementation of certain types of barriers to the vote. 2014, I believe, was, or 2013 was when the Voting Rights Act was gutted by the US Supreme Court. And I think it was in 2014 that Georgia immediately put together a voter ID law, which of course was just an arbitrary barrier to the right to vote, particularly for people of color in Georgia. And one of the things that I did read this weekend was that the Secretary of State from the governor, seemingly from the governor's behest, has also put together a list of guidelines for the counties to use for the upcoming runoff vote, runoff election, of reasons why they could, for some reason, challenge someone's voter registration status. And one of the most controversial mechanisms inside of this kind of set of guidelines is this kind of no registration, no vote rule, which means they can challenge your right to vote, or they can challenge your voting status in the state of Georgia if they don't believe that you have a registered vehicle in the state of Georgia, which is odd. For example, I myself don't have a registered vehicle. Well, yeah, I don't technically have a registered vehicle anymore. My mom took control of my vehicle when I moved overseas. You know, I signed it off to her. So if I were to walk into the voter precinct on, you know, January 5th, someone could say, you know what, we don't think you have a registered vehicle in the state of Georgia, or we don't think that you paid your vehicle taxes. We're going to challenge your vote. I would still be allowed to cast a vote, but that vote would not be counted until there is a court date, and I have to go up to the court and I have to show that I am a legal resident of the state of Georgia, which by that point, would it even matter? And so there are plenty of ways that this is still going on. And of course, with a rule like this tends to affect urban areas, because in urban areas, if I'm, you know, living inside of Atlanta, why do I need a car necessarily? And also poorer people tend to not have their own vehicles, or tend to not have their vehicle registrations at, you know, the specific time where it's being asked, and also people of color.
So is that a poll tax? I mean, that you have to have a vehicle, or that they look at you sideways if you don't have one?
So I'm wondering whether or not that will be taken into consideration. I'm hoping that there will be legislation against this rule. I think what the state of Georgia will argue is that you don't have to have, it's not an immediate poll tax there at the polls. You just have to show that you have like a vehicle registration. Or if you don't have vehicle registration, you have to show some other proof that you are a legal resident of the state of Georgia. The problem with that is that when I think about what it is to prove, I mean, outside of an ID, right? I do have a Georgia driver's license. But let's say I didn't have a driver's license because I don't drive. How do I prove my residency to the state, right? Like, it's not like my birth certificate proves my residency of the state of Georgia. My social security card doesn't do that. I guess I could bring a power bill, but who knows? Like, that doesn't necessarily prove anything. And so to me, effectively, this is some sort of poll tax or poll test in some way. But I think the state of Georgia's answer to that would not be the case.
Yes, well, the state of Georgia's answers are a little fishy
Right.
sometimes anyway. So
But
I
I'm
haven't.
hoping within the next few weeks we'll see some sort of legislative or um, some sort of litigation against these guidelines.
Okay, I have another question for you. How do you think the Latinx and Black communities can work together to fight voter suppression?
This is an important question and a bit of a difficult question to talk about because I think Black community and Latinx community, we experience a lot of the same oppression, but I think that it's difficult sometimes to realize that we are, or to connect with each other. In some ways, I think that the United States as a country, and certainly the state of Georgia and our communities are somewhat segregated. And I think it's critical that we work together. I think that my liberation and the liberation and rights for my people are only protected when the rights of all people are protected and other marginalized people. I think the key there is getting people out to make those critical connections, not just personal friendships, but also making connections in the work that we're doing to have like Black liberation and Black racial justice groups working with Latinx justice groups to make sure that we know what we are all doing. Of course, we're all on the same page, but figuring out how we can support each other on the ground and in the field when we're actually doing or organizing and protesting and getting out the vote.
Right. Thank you so much. I just want to say before we go on to our next questioner, if you haven't read Isabel Wilkerson's latest book, Cast, I would suggest that you do. It's very elucidating about things like why there would be 1,000 counties in Georgia so that wealthy white landowners could only have to make a short drive to get to the county seat or whatever. It's an astounding book with a lot of information and just what Ben said about this. We're also having a book club on Sunday. If you've read it, please join it and come and discuss it with us. Back to you, Anelika.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Ben. And indeed, we are stronger together. And I think with Martha, who's here through the border protection team, we've seen a bit of an array of different border suppression or Georgia local election officers being very harsh with the proving of the residency, especially for those voters that are abroad. It's awful. How do you prove that you're actually, have the right to vote for Georgia? So yeah, that I completely see that. And we had to deal with a wide array of different questions and proofs that you actually have the right to vote in Georgia. So thank you, Ben. And now we'll move on to Rosa and Miguel. Would you like to ask the questions to Rosa?
Yes. Hola, Rosa. How are you? ¿Cómo está? Recently, Anelika invited me to a Facebook group to organize in Georgia, specifically for Hispanic voters. And I was very warmly welcomed by Rosa Maria Kleiberg. She was very nice to me. And we've been talking, and I have a question for you, Rosa. How did you decide to start this Latinx vote group? And what was the biggest challenge in starting it? Rosa, you are muted right now. You're muted.
Sorry. Okay. So Miguel, I start this group because I belong to many political groups on Facebook, and I saw there was a lot of enthusiasm of people for helping Georgia, to get, a lot of Democrats were from all the states getting together in multiple Facebook groups, but I didn't see one that has Spanish-speaking opportunities for our communities. So I said, well, what about our people, So that was my question that I did to myself. Let's do a group that put all the efforts around all the United States of Spanish-speaking volunteers so we can help outreach our communities. And that's why I created a group. And one of the biggest challenge that I have in creating the group basically was myself. So having some self-doubts, you know, for a moment, I say, oh my God, am I going to do a group? You know, I never done a group by myself, you know, how is this gonna be? But you know, the love for people, the love for democracy, the love for justice, it make me just forget about it. And I say, you know what, I don't care. I'm gonna do it because we need allies. We need people who love people just to connect, to get together. Like, you know, like Ben was saying, you know, we need allies. We need allies for all to make justice. So this group is very welcome for everybody, people who are Hispanic and people who are not Hispanic, but they love the community or want to learn about our communities. So we're very welcoming to everybody. And you know, I wanted to make this group also to nurture my volunteers, you know, helping them go through the whole process, because sometimes volunteering can be scary, you know, and some people have issues with the system. So I'm really giving my 41 days to this cause, to give all my time. I'm working full time on this group and multiple groups. Like Ben was saying, you know, it's not only about make friendships, you know, it's about making, you know, getting to know other activists, other people who are interested in the same things that you're interested. So I am connected to independent activists, to multiple grassroots groups, like I am with Latins, Poder Latins. I am with Galeo too. I am with Mi Gente. I am with Fair Fight, and with Water for Grassroots. You know, with all these groups together, and we are like sharing informations and sharing how we can make this happen. And it is just, we really need to do something. This is a life or death situation for me. You know, being as an ICU nurse, seeing people dying out there, you know, we can make a difference. We can make a difference, and we can help people have a voice, but we really need to work together on this. Thank you.
Well, we have a follow-up question for you.
Okay.
What forms of outreach make the greatest impact? And are there tactics that are more effective than others to get more people involved? And what communities respond better to what outreach form?
So, you know, in all these trainings that I had in multiple groups, what we have been told is like person-to-person outreach is the most effective way of reaching people. Obviously, I am in Connecticut, so I never had a chance to do that. But the second way of reaching out for people is by calling them. So that's what we did with our 50 members of our group in the general election, and that's what we're doing now. But the problem that we have now is like the campaigns are not doing much. Like Jerry was saying, there is not much of a Spanish outreach. I connect with both of the campaigns, and they are not doing Spanish outreach at this moment. So that's why I am working with all the grassroots, so I can give opportunities to the volunteers. So what I found that is the most helpful for me when I made these phone calls is just to have a conversation, a human-to-human conversation. You know, try to connect in somehow. You know, maybe we don't have to share everything about ourselves, but even, you know, I'm a teacher, I'm a mom, I'm an immigrant, you know, hey, you know, I am from Peru. So we can have that connection. As long as we get that connection, we can advance a relationship with the voter, and we can provide them information. Also, it's very important to tell them, we're here to help you. I'm a volunteer, you know, remind them that a little bit. I'm here to help you. And do a lot of listening, you know, because they have a lot to say, and it is good to listen to them and be in their shoes, you know, why they think the way they think. Be present in that conversation. And I think that can bring us a long way. What else? So I know our Latin community is very diverse. We are not one Latin Americans. We're not just one country. We are multiple countries, and we have, you know, different ways how we express ourselves. We have different ways how we talk and we think, and we just different people. We come from different backgrounds. You know, some people are nurses, some people, you know, are teachers. We do different things. What I find is I hear that they are a group that is called Mi Gente is trying to do some the phone banking. The script is trying to work on a script that is very specific for a country. So I would like to see how that goes, you know, in the future. And also I would like to see if somebody does some research about, you know, how we can talk to voters, how voters like to hear this information about politics. You know, I don't think there is enough study on minorities and how they want to listen to that message. You know, maybe, you know, we're not communicating the way they want to hear topics. So I would like to really see in the future more of that.
Thank you so much, Rosa. I hope to eventually meet you if I will eventually be flying over to Atlanta and be working on the ground and helping Georgians that are also Spanish speakers to go out and vote. So hopefully I'll see you there later next month. Muchas gracias, Rosa.
De nada, muchas gracias a ti.
Yeah, thank you, Rosa, and thank you, Miguel. And I see that the chat has been very active, and some of the questions are being answered in the chat, but it'll be good for all of us to hear the answers to these questions. So Angela, do you want to read out one of the questions from the audience?
Yeah, I hope I'm starting at the top because there's so many questions here. This is from Melinda Sedley from New Mexico. She's a New Mexico voter living in Switzerland and working for Action Together Zurich, a group of American progressives. And she says, I have read that people in Georgia do not necessarily want outsiders coming in and overwhelming Georgians in the run-up to this runoff election. What is the best role for non-Georgian voters, especially those abroad?
Is this question for who? For anybody?
Yeah, for both. Yeah, for all three of you.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Perspective.
Okay, perfect. So what I find, there was a lot of, you know, they were saying, they were talking about, you know, people not to come to Georgia, but now actually there is a group of grassroots groups that they came together and they really are looking for help to come to Georgia. So this is something new. I was in a meeting last week, and actually, you know, anybody who would like to come and let me know. And actually they are helping even with expenses. And so it has changed a little bit of that view lately. I know this is a whole group of, you know, they were asking people not to come before, but now they're asking them to come. So from that perspective of coming or not coming. But also they talk a lot about, you know, how we talk to voters, also very important sometimes. And, you know, when you call, you know, I'm calling from Connecticut. So, you know, it's also how we talk and how we approach them too. I think it's depending what would you like to do. If you want to do phone banking, you know, definitely, you know, is if you do in Spanish, maybe, you know, I will have less problem of having an accent from Georgia because I already, you know, have an accent. There is not, you know, it's not going to be a problem there. But I hear that, you know, I hear that a lot of people like the postcards too. So I don't know. It's depending who you ask, I would say.
Yeah, from our perspective, we're certainly not asking for folks to come to Georgia to help us. We've been doing this work for many years in Georgia. We know our communities. Yes, there is more work that needs to be done than can be done in Georgia to get out the vote. But I think given that Georgia is in the red zone for COVID spread, the positivity rate of COVID in the Latino community in particular is particularly high. So we have to approach everything that is being done in Georgia with that perspective. Vallejo is partnering with Mi Familia Vota. Mi Familia Vota is bringing some of their canvassers from other states into the state to do. They have a very robust COVID safety protocol for both their canvassers and community members that they implement in place. So that's the sense, I think, from folks here in Georgia, from the C3 and the C4 space, that we are working collaboratively with. Volunteers are being asked for some of our phone banking efforts that we are having. We require all of our volunteers to be bilingual in English and Spanish. If not, we can't use you in the community. Language access is a big issue for the Latino community, and we're targeting in particular the Latino community to go out to vote. Other ways that people can volunteer is similar to the postcard thing, but we've adopted sort of a Felices Fiestas holiday card program, where people can sign up to adopt 10 Latinx voters and add them to your holiday card mailing, and wish them a happy holidays first and foremost, but then also encourage them to go vote on the January 5th runoff election as well. So there's different ways that people can help, certainly, but yeah, the coming to Georgia is something that most organizations have not necessarily looked positively on. As Rosa did indicate, some of that perspective has been shifting a little bit because the work before us, particularly around the holiday season, is a daunting task. So some groups are open for that, some groups are not open for that.
So should we just send money? Is that?
Certainly, supporting organizations that are on the ground in Georgia is the best way to do that, not only for this election cycle, but we have ongoing year-long voter outreach programs that we do. We're a part of a collective called Pro Georgia as well, where there's 40-some civic engagement groups in the environmental, GLBTQ, Black-led, Asian-led, refugee-led organizations that are working collaboratively to make sure that we can leverage resources appropriately and focus in areas that we focus areas with. And we don't just do this work on our own. So we do it collaboratively to make sure that we can leverage resources in that way. So we're working smartly in Georgia to build power for our communities. So it's not just about this election. It is about building power collectively for all of our communities together. I was mentioning something Ben mentioned around Black-Brown Coalition as well that I wanted to add, is Galeo is very much in concert with that. We have to lift up our destinies together and our opportunities that we have together, both in the Black, Latino, and Asian communities. We have shared destinies, we have shared values, and we need to work together. So we're going to be working together from a redistricting perspective. We're working together from fighting voter suppression. We're working together against in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. So there's a lot of collaborative work that's happening in Georgia, and there's plenty of opportunity to support many organizations that are doing that type of power building work here in the state.
Thank you. Just add on to that really quick. If you are, whether you're in the States or you're abroad, and you're really wanting to figure out how can I personally, add to the effort in Georgia to get out the vote or to motivate voters, honestly, you can tack on to one of the programs or initiatives or organizations that's already doing the work. I mean, it is the case that Southerners are kind of proud. We don't always like a lot of outside influence, but I think that is maybe more of a stereotype than the truth. I think if you are tacking on to people who are already doing the work, who know the community or the communities where the work is being done, then I don't think that there's a problem there.
Good. Thank you all for giving us different options of how we can help, from, just sending money, or just looking into the organizations, or, sending postcards or phone banking. There's multiple options for all of us who are abroad but want to help.
Yeah,
and I think
a lot of organizations, is there a master list somewhere or an umbrella organization, or we just kind of choose who we want to send
There
money
is
to?
a master list. There's a one-pager that the global team put together, and I can try to find that.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, later's fine. I just don't know. Yeah. Where.
There is a list of, and I know Galileo is in that list, and there's a few other Georgia-based
Usually like to
organizations.
do follow-up emails anyway with all of the information, and we try to get every speaker to recommend at least 3 organizations. So we'll be able to, we have your emails for everyone who signed up
Okay.
to the
Okay,
presentation.
thank you.
We'll be able to send that along.
Indeed, good point. If you are SVP to the event, then we have your email and we can send it back to you. I think next, Norma, would you like to ask some of the other questions from the audience?
Yes, there's a lot of great questions going on in the chat. I guess we'll just try to pick some of them that are more overarching. So this one is particularly for Jerry and Rosa. So what do you find are the biggest challenges in reaching the Latino voters in Georgia? And I know, Jerry, you talked previously about getting information out in Spanish, but is there anything else that is particularly difficult in targeting the Latino demographic?
Well, with my recent phone calling that I've been doing, I know they having difficulty with the data that has been collected. We don't know, and I think Jared was talking about this a little bit. So sometimes we don't know if these people speak Spanish. Sometimes we don't know if they are where they're from, or where, so sometimes it's a little bit difficult. That's why we cannot really make a very particular strategic way of reaching them, because we don't have a lot we have information, but we could work on it and make it much better to make the message clearer for each community, hopefully in the future.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work done to help better identify voters and their language preference. Language access is a big issue that we have, but that's not the only issue that we see here in Georgia. Georgia still has an exact match process that if you register to vote, they run your name and your information across databases, both with the Driver's License Bureau and then with the Social Security Administration. And if there's one little typo, then you're flagged as a non-citizen and you have to go through extra steps to prove your citizenship, for example. We're still in litigation against the state for that exact match process, because they've been trying since 2008 to implement it in a way that doesn't disproportionately impact minority communities, but it continues to do so. Every iteration that this type of policy has gone through has disproportionately impacted Black, Latino, and Asian community members disproportionately as compared to white community members. So there's a lot of challenges with people exercising their right to vote in Georgia, and part of our job is to make sure that we can help them navigate some of those processes, because many election officials aren't up to date with with language access laws that how they need to practice in their work. So we have to be there to make sure that we can push back in those situations.
Great, thank you. Let's see, some other questions are, so Nancy Mindick asks, how are you going to keep voters safe? So I think that Georgia should consider Joy to the Polls, similar to what Pennsylvania did, an initiative that changed the vibe / release tension through music, made polls safe. So is there a particular concern about voter suppression at the polls as well?
In leading into the 2020 general election, we did see militia activity around as President Trump was pushing for folks to verify and to check and to look closely at elections, polling locations, etc. We didn't see much of that during the early voting period, and once the general election came through, voting, many people had voted in the either vote by mail or through their early voting process. Unfortunately, we didn't see much of that. We do think that there is the potential for something like that to happen for the runoff elections as well. So we're going to be monitoring that. There is a hostility towards language access. There's this provision in the Voting Rights Act called Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act that enables any voter that where the county doesn't provide election information in a different language, any voter can choose to bring somebody to help them exercise their right to vote in that process, all the way up to voting on the machines. So there's been some hostility and re-education that has to happen from some election officials in that regard, but that's why we're monitoring the situation very closely, making sure that people can exercise the right to vote. And with regards to like joy to the polls and things of that nature, Georgia, we had a horrific June primary election in Georgia that really was pathetic. Execution of the election system in Georgia that really fell apart and failed voters in multiple ways. So from that, we learned that we've implemented the coalition group that we've talked about, pro-Georgia. We implemented what we call party at the polls, where if there is long lines that are developing either in early voting locations or in specific minority precincts that we are looking at, then we will either take food and water to give to all voters standing in line to make sure that they can wait as needed in that process, and making sure that people will have access to food and water in that time frame. And then there's been some precincts that local artists have also gone and performed for voters while they were waiting in line, just to keep their mind off of waiting as well. So there's a lot of creative ways in which folks on the ground, the 40 plus organizations that we work with are implementing some creative ways to make sure that we can, if voters show up to vote and there's long lines, then we're going to make sure that people do stay in line as long as possible to make sure that they can cast their vote and make it as easy as possible for them as well.
I do also want to tack onto that as far as like, actual like voter security when you're out at the polls. I don't know what this will look like on January 5th, but I know across the South especially, I think it was nationwide, that the ACLU had hotlines set up. If you felt threatened or intimidated for any reason, you could call this hotline. I have a friend of mine in Alabama, that's where I did my bachelor's and master's, where he's a lawyer in Auburn, Alabama, in Lee County, and he specifically set up a coalition of lawyers who kind of drove around the county that day and just talked to voters in the polls. And anytime there was an issue that seemed threatening, where someone felt bad, they basically called the sheriff and called the judge to say, hey, you need to send someone out here to make sure that these people go away. There's a group of people who are just standing too close to the polling place. I assume that those types of initiatives will happen again. I just don't know for sure what those will look like.
Awesome. I think that this is a perfect question for people who live in Georgia. So that's, I'm going to, don't say anything about this.
All right, great, thank you. Onelika, do you have one last question?
Yes, I had one last question actually for Ben, because Ben, we are all throughout the different country committees in the 8, we're trying to find other GA voters. And actually, this is not my question, it's actually from Pauline from Belgium. Do you have any ideas on how to find more GA voters or Georgia voters that are abroad?
Right.
That's like keywords or groups or.
Right. So there are plenty of Facebook groups. I think we have someone in the event right now, Evelyn, who's a member of multiple different American groups, and she put me on to the Georgians Living Abroad group. I think the easiest and fastest way is through social media. If you can find a group of Georgians who have like a Facebook group or Instagram, there are no groups on Instagram, I don't think, but I'm very new to Instagram, but if you can find people through social media. I know that Democrats Abroad, of course, has their own voter rolls of people who are registered Democrats who have voted in previous elections. And I've been working through some of those voter rolls to make calls. Of course, if you're not like volunteering or you're not like with Democrats Abroad, it's going to be difficult to get your hands on that kind of information. organizations that are like advocacy organizations or organizing organizations, you can always definitely get access to the state's voter rolls. That costs money. It costs about $250, I think, to get the most recent elections. But when you get access to that, you should be able to get, you know, a whole list of open information of people who vote, who are registered voters who voted in the most recent elections. And then you can kind of create a strategy from there to reach out to those people in your organization. But as far as like kind of private people, it's really difficult. I think the easiest way is through social media.
Can I just jump in there for a second on this topic? Yeah, it is the best way through social media, and Democrats Abroad did purchase the voting rolls for Georgia voters overseas. It's a very small, I mean, we have a small amount, and we got maybe just a little bit larger amount from the voting rolls, but it's still a small amount. The best way to find people is if everyone would go on any of the Facebook pages for Democrats Abroad and share a post about the Georgia election, because we don't know who is voting in Georgia. It's not a question that normally you ask a friend or a person you meet, except in Democrats Abroad, but not everybody's in DA. Nobody asks you, oh, what state do you vote in? You know, so we don't know who's a friend or a friend of a friend that will see your post. So that would be super helpful if everybody would just share that information out. And you can share it on Instagram, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, whatever, share it multiple times. I just discovered that I have a friend who votes in Georgia that I didn't realize she voted in Georgia, because she said she voted in the Georgia runoff. That's how I knew. So you don't know who's voting. So just share out the information and people will hopefully see it and respond.
Okay.
And if I
Can
can
I
add
say?
something to that real quick. I know that we've shared a lot of information about the Georgia runoff in Spanish for the Hispanic caucus. Even if you don't speak Spanish and you think maybe this isn't related to you because you're not bilingual, like still share that information. We do have people, everyone has people that they know that speak Spanish, and chances are maybe one of them's a Georgia voter and they'll see that. So don't be afraid to share something just because it's in Spanish. I really encourage everyone to just go for the bilingual route. We need the Latinx voter. We need every single vote we can get.
Indeed, it is. I think I just put down the Facebook page for Democrats Abroad, but also we'll share as well the Hispanic Caucus page and the Global Black Caucus. And it's about sharing, it's about spreading the word, because as Angela explained, we also Belgium got the voter rolls for Georgia, but it's a small group. It's very tiny, but I think through word of mouth, and I think to Rosa and Jerry, help us out if any of the people, the voters that you reach out to have family, relatives that are abroad and they can vote, will be more than happy to help them out. And we, through our platform, Vote from Abroad, we provide nonpartisan help. So it's just about voting and helping them to vote. And I think we've reached the end of our event. We're actually a bit past the time. I know there were a lot of questions and people were really interested. And
Can
I know—
I make a comment about social media? I'm
Sure.
very active on Facebook. My name's Evelyn Riera. I'm a Georgia voter. I'm very, very active on Facebook, which Ben mentioned. I'd like to make a comment. Social media warriors, it's not about spamming the group. Please get a little bit of feeling for the group. The best new entry I've had in one of the groups, because I've been in these groups for years or months, so I know the culture, get a feeling for the group. And the best new entry I had was somebody who actually took a little bit of time and to see recent posts from Democrats Abroad or Vote from Abroad or voting, and they sort of liked them and then posted their own post. What is also not good is to spam the threads, and I've seen people from Democrats Abroad do this. They go into a thread, unrelated subject, and just spam it with here voting and this and that, I don't think you get very far. You have to sort of respect the culture a little bit, you know. So I just wanted to say that. Sorry.
No, it's
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you, Evelyn. And indeed, in different groups, especially the Georgia groups, and I imagine that Georgia voters are bombarded with information these days. We need to tailor a message and also, not only retweet or share, but also try to tailor what we're putting out there. And I think with that, I think we're going to close the event today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I'd just like to remind everyone on the call and those of you who are voters in Georgia, just like Angela did at the beginning, please make sure you vote in the runoff elections. Some of you might have already voted because we know ballots are out there. But if for some reason you haven't gotten around to it, or you need to still register, request your ballot, please go to votefromabroad.org/Georgia. You'll find all the information you need with the deadlines and links to register to vote or request your ballot. I hope you enjoyed our event on the vote of Black, Indigenous, and people of color as much as I did. Your support goes a long way. Please visit democratsabroad.org, donate, so we can continue bringing more events like this to Americans around the world. We would also like to remind you that we have mentioned and added in the chat a few organizations that you can support. So I know Jerry shared a few initiatives they have in Caleo, as well as Rosa. So, we'll be putting all this together in an email as well. So take a look at them if you'd like to volunteer or donate. And it's also never too late to get involved with Democrats Abroad. So, feel free to sign up in democratsabroad.org/volunteer. New first-time volunteers are very welcome. And with that, we're going to end the call. Thanks again to our speakers. Thank you, Jerry, Ben, and Rosa, and everyone who took the time to join our event. Thank you, and have a nice evening or a nice rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye. It was great.
Thank you.